So now we're going to be looking at the page source itself to see what basically how these web site is encapsulated in terms of information. So we're going to look at the web developer, the tools, then go to web developer. This is using Mozilla. And then we're going to look at the page source. So the page source is basically how the page is made up. And the reason why we're doing this is so we can get a sense of what kind of information is not only there, but also how it's encapsulated, the use of the kinds of tools. So HTML being the main tool here, you can see HTML is the main tool. Has a lot of information using metadata, link data, other kinds of information, descriptive data. It's all listed here. So how do we actually get a document? So essentially when we're going to a website, this is what we see, or this is what our computer sees. This is how it interprets it. And that basically that HTML code then allows us to see the actual website. But as far as our computer is concerned, this is the actual information it's getting. And this is how we're going to then go to a website, or when we go to a website, this is the kind of information we have to then scrape. So how do we then scrape this information that is basically a number of tags, these HTML tags, with various texts and references to images that sit in different places and other kinds of information that are located here? How do we actually go about getting this information? So luckily, Beautiful Soup makes this relatively easy. So we can basically begin to then try to get this information despite its relatively complex looking structure. So let's go back to what we have here. So here's the URL. That goes to that website that I just showed you. So you have to envision it as basically going to that HTML looking page when one goes to here, even though we see something else when we're actually clicking on it. And so what I'm doing here is then getting a timestamp. So this is a timestamp of my current machine. It's giving me information just coming right from the machine. This is basically a library within Python. It's using the time library, as you can see here. Then I'm going to then utilize Beautiful Soup. So what Beautiful Soup often uses, there's a number of ways to instantiate Beautiful Soup, the particular class constructor that you see here. So Beautiful Soup is the class. It's a very lightweight tool. If you install it, it'll take literally a few seconds. And that makes it quite powerful, actually, in some ways, because it's fairly easy to use and doesn't take much space. In that it's pretty simple in terms of the library requirements. So you can see what it requires is in creating this Beautiful Soup instantiation is that you just simply need the URL, opening the URL to that web link. So basically create that string or link so we can begin to open that URL and see what's there. And then information that this is a kind of HTML page, that it's basically a page that's encapsulated as an HTML. So Beautiful Soup understands the type of website it's going to be looking at. And so those two bits of information are then sent to it, and we get this soup object that comes out of that result of instantiation. And then what we then tell it is find everything that has the tag image. So this FindAll command is telling Beautiful Soup to look at every tag that has that IMG tag. This basically makes that whole large, confusing looking HTML page much simpler in that it's going to go right to the tags that we're most interested in. And then so we return essentially a list of basically tags or links, excuse me, that are more or less not just links, but they're actually bits of information that have this tag of IMG. So we can then iterate through all these bits of information and get each one. So each area or each set of information that has that IMG tag. So let's take a look at that, what that actually means. Let's begin to parse this. So let's debug it, run it as Python. So I'm going to run it here, and you'll see it should stop at that timestamp. So we'll get the timestamp in a second. So we get time and then timestamp, and then you'll see that basically we're returning that value, and it's going to now then look at that link. So if you look at the link, you'll see that IMG is returned, and you can see a bunch of information. But what we really want is that SRC part. That's what we're actually more interested in. So we're going to split that link. So you can see the split command. And the SRC is what we're going to split it. So this part where it says SRC equals, and then return that part that has that link. So we can see if that link is relevant to a kind of information or link that we're actually interested in keeping. So what we're doing here in this example is basically we're going to be parsing, getting some data from a website, recover its link, image, and descriptive information. Okay, so we're going to find that information that's most relevant to us. And so by looking at the HTML of the website, we already have a sense of how that information is encapsulated. And now we're going to try to scrape that part of information that we're most interested in. That is the descriptive information about the object we're trying to find. So what we know is that when it has this finds.org.uk images, then we're very close. That is, we're basically, we have something related to an image that we want to actually capture, the image of the object, as well as the description. So that's why we put here, if we don't see this finds.org.uk.images, then that means we don't want that link. We don't want that specific set of information because it doesn't have the information we need. So what you should see then is it continues. Okay, so it's going to keep continuing until we get to the link that has the kind of link we want. So if it has thumbnails, then we want it to continue. And if it doesn't have this finds.org.images, then we also want it to continue. So basically, we want that link that has that finds.org.uk images in it, because that'll be the most descriptive. So let's resume this iteration. You can see we finally got to that link, and this is what the link looks like. It has that finds.org.uk.images or / images, and you can see it has that buckle. It's got a JPEG file that is referenced, so it'll print that, and we'll see it. And you can see that we have this. Now we can then open that link. We can then go ahead, connect to that file. So we're going to connect to that image file. So what we're going to do here is actually download that image, because we're going to a link that connects us to an image. Okay, so we get that image using the URL lib2, which is another Python library for using essentially or connecting to websites and web information. And then we're going to open that JPEG. So it's a blob, remember? So we're going to write this blob called txt, and it's going to be now we read that sort of file stream, and then we're going to sort of write out that image. Okay, so what we then did essentially is close that. Then we're going to close that image. So we've basically created now that image using the timestamp. So we've created an image with a current timestamp. So that's going to close. Okay, and so we have now an image created. We should see it hopefully in a second. So after that, we're going to then want to get some text that may relate to that image. Let's go ahead and go to the next step. And you can see to get the text, we're looking for something called H1, because we know the key information is going to have H1 as part of H1 is an HTML tag. H1 is in that tag that has the descriptive information about that buckle that we just retrieved from the image, okay, or that buckle image that we just retrieved from the website. So you'll see here we have this obj results. So we're telling Beautiful Soup to find something with H1, and it did. So it's returned something called buckle. So H1 is basically an HTML tag to make a title. So the title of the object is found by this find command, because H1 essentially is a way to reference a title. It tells HTML to make a title. So we're finding the H1 tag, which is the title, and in this case the title is called buckle. So we'll see buckle printed. And then now we're going to tell it to find the div with attributes. So the div is another HTML tag which has attributes called property and PAS description. Now these subtags or attributes actually are attributes that are in the HTML website. So that's in the actual PAS website, which will tell us to find the information in relation to this buckle. So after the H1 tag, then there are other tags called div that have attributes called property and PAS description. So these attributes will be returned, or all this text that's related to this HTML should be returned. So the text in the website essentially is encapsulated within this div with attributes of property and PAS description. So we're returning the description essentially that's within the PAS website for this buckle. So if we look at what we have, we look at the text, you can see that we return this property PAS description, and it has the following information. So it returns this P tag. So within the HTML is something called P, which is the print the following. So it basically prints out this information. And this information is what we want, though. It has all the information about this belt buckle. It says medieval copper alloy single loop buckle dating from about something or other. So it has all this information that we're interested in about this buckle, about its date and description. So we're going to get that text. We're going to tell it to find that P. So find where it says P, as you can see here, and then get that text. So it'll return the text in relation to that P, which was part of this PAS description property. Okay, so we get that, and then we print that text and see what it looks like. And you can see it prints quite nicely here. A medieval copper alloy single loop buckle dating from about AD 1200 to 1350. So we returned that text. And that basically is what happens through this simple parser. So what we're basically doing is getting an image by finding it using this sort of FindAll command to return all images. Then we're splitting that information where we get SRC. We're checking to make sure the link is relevant to the image we want. So we're keeping the one that we do want. And then we're going to get all the text. We're going to get some text, not all, but some text from the website. And we're going to find the ones that has relevant attributes, the property that has the PAS description, because that has the description of the actual objects, or in this case, object. And then we're going to find the specific part of that description and then return that text and then print it out. So that's exactly what this beautiful C parser essentially is doing, or scraping that information and parsing it up to get the specific parts of information that we actually want to keep. So you can see we removed all those HTML tags and kept only the text that we're actually interested in below.